of the United States under God, indivisible,
with liberty and justice. Mr. President, point of privilege, please.
Yes.
Commissioners, it is my great honor to introduce to you ACG's first and newest bicyclist and pedestrian coordinator, Meg McCarthy. She's in the room today. Meg? And I'm very happy to let you know that she actually came back today after we told her everything she's going to have to do. So we are very...
That's a good sign.
Well, I understand she fell partial victim to our real estate crisis in Ada County, so glad you made it through that. I would entertain a motion to accept the agenda.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor? Aye.
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 Any opposed? Then we'll go into the consent agenda. And as you know, items on the consent agenda are considered to be routine and will be enacted with one motion. And there will be no separate discussion on these items unless a commissioner or citizen so requests, in which case the item will be removed to the regular agenda and addressed that way. All consent agenda items are commission action items unless otherwise noted. Do I have a motion to approve the consent agenda?
Mr. Chairman, there's one typo on the minutes. I just wanted to point that out. I've raised it with Stacy under the consent agenda items of the minutes. My disclosure referred to item 2, not item 3. So with that correction, I would move to approve the consent agenda.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? The motion carries. Then we will go into our regular agenda, in which case, our number one and only item on the regular agenda is a presentation from Bob McQuade, our county assessor. He comes to us every year, and I'm always really happy to see him. I consider Bob McQuade Idaho's version of Abraham Lincoln, and I have probably more respect for you as a public servant than any other in this state because of what I have observed for many years while you've been in office of your integrity, your willingness to deal with people like me in whatever capacity I have been, and for the things that you try to do to make property taxes less onerous for us taxpayers. Thank you and welcome.
Mr. President, thank you so much for those kind words, and I don't know if I could live up to them, but I should.
You already have.
Well, thank you so much. You've just literally made my day. For the new commissioners, every year I come out and just explain what's been going on with assessments so that you can get started on your budget process before the rolls are all closed later on and finalized in July. I'm going to set my timer here. I don't want to go over my 15 minutes. This is going to be a little bit different presentation this year than in years past, and that is I'm not going to spend as much time on the numbers. And that's why I passed out that spreadsheet for you. You'll have those numbers there. But it's going to be more of a narrative to put these numbers into context. This has just been a very unusual year. I'm going to talk about the total value, go into a little more detail on total value, residential value, just hit some of the key values, and then also I'll go into a little dialogue about what we see as driving the price increases in single-family residential. I'll discuss some of the commercial values, new construction, urban renewal, and then I want to just spend about the last 5 minutes or so talking about something that everybody seems to be talking about, but is misunderstood by just about everybody who's talking about it, and that is tax burden. That's really been an important issue, and there's a lot of misunderstanding about tax burden. Maybe I can get that clear up, at least from my perspective. So we're sending out about 212,000 assessment notices in just a couple of weeks. And we'll naturally be getting lots of calls when we send those out. We'll find out how that goes. Total market value here for Ada County Highway District is about $92 billion. That's up 28% compared to the $71.5 billion last year. That's the total market value, not the taxable value. The taxable value, we need to make some adjustments to come to the total market value. So the adjustments to arrive at taxable value, the first one is homeowners exemption. The number I have here is $12.5 billion. That's going to change. And a lot of these numbers are going to change that I'm giving you today because the governor just signed a bill early this morning. We haven't had a chance to make those adjustments based upon the new legislation. And we will get those numbers over to you as soon as we have them. It'll probably be towards the end of this week or the very first part of next week. We'll get those numbers to you. But for today's discussion, it's the homeowner's exemption value is $12.5 billion. It's now fixed at $125,000. It's gone up 25%. Something new this year, there's a bill that was passed the year before last where you can sign for the homeowner's exemption all year round. Prior to this year, you had to apply for the exemption prior to April 15th. You had to have lived in the property between January 1st and April 15th to get the homeowner's exemption. It's now you can apply for it anytime. You can buy we'll say a home that was used as a rental property first of the year. You buy it in December, you get the whole homeowner's exemption for that year, even though you may have only owned it for about literally 1/12 of the year. So then we also have other exemptions. They amount to about $1.5 billion. That's using last year's exemptions as a proxy. The commissioners have to get me the exemptions prior to the 15th of May. So I don't have those yet, but I think it's safe to use last year's exemptions, other than the homestead exemption, as a proxy for that. So we take that out, $1.5 billion. But then we have to add in operating property. Operating property is property that's owned by utilities, such as pipelines, railroad tracks, power lines. The State Tax Commission assesses those, and they don't get those numbers to us until August. But last year, operating property is $918 million, so you would add that back in, giving us what I call a potential taxable value of about $79 billion, and that's about a 31% increase over the $60 billion from the prior year. Again, as soon as we get the numbers based upon the new legislation, we'll get those right out to you. Just quickly want to hit the residential. On the residential side, just the market value. It's not the taxable value of $73.5 billion. That's up 29% for market value for single-family residential. About a 26% median increase for single-family residential here in Ada County. And something that's interesting, I had someone ask me the other day, where are the hot spots? Well, there are no hot spots. Everything is right around that. It's really about 24 to about 28% is the range, so it's a real tight range. Some years we'll see some that are going up on this scale here, it might be going up, we'll say, 28, 29%, other ones going up much slower, maybe 15 or 20%. But this year, single-family residential, wherever you are in the county, it's all up about 26%. I just want to quickly talk about what I see is going on in the single-family residential market, is that just been causing these increases that I have never seen. I never would have imagined. I don't think anyone would have imagined this if you would have gone back 20 years ago. But we had 13,500 homes sold in Ada County last year. Typically, we'll have about 10,000, 11,000, but 13,500. And this is in the context, too, of a year that we had a pandemic. That is what is just so amazing about it. We had 3,700 homes constructed last year, but the earlier year would have been 2019, we had 4,700 homes. So we had fewer new homes constructed last year, and that certainly is adding pressure to the prices. So what it really boils down to is just a supply and demand imbalance is what we're looking at. On the demand side, we have the population is growing about 3% a year. That means our population will double about every 23 years. In Ada County is about 500,000 right now, and if this holds up, and who knows what's going to happen if it were to hold up, it's not likely to hold up, but if it were, we're looking at 1 million people here in Ada County in just a little over 20 years. The millennials, they're in the market. They're wanting to buy property. They had always been holding back for whatever reasons, but they're now entering the market, and that's adding more pressure on the demand side. Also, on the supply side, that's on the demand. Supply side is homeowners have refinanced, and those people who have refinanced are staying put. And so those homes where they might be selling, putting those homes back on the market, they aren't. They're just staying put. So that's really constricting the supply. Low interest rates has certainly caused a lot of demand, and as long as they remain low, we expect to see a strong appreciation. But mortgages are only one part of the equation. The other part is people are paying cash. People are moving into the valley. They're selling their property in Seattle or Portland or in California or wherever, and they're coming in, they're paying cash $650,000, $700,000 for a home, or $400,000, and they still have money to go buy a brand new car, that $60,000 car they've always wanted. So it's between the cash buyers and the low interest rates. And these sales, they literally get into bidding wars. Last year, 50% of those homes sold for the asking price. 25% sold for 4% more than the asking price. And we're seeing that 7% more than the asking price towards the end of the year became very typical. So you just get into these bidding wars that you just keep driving the price up. And if you have a $350,000 house, somebody pays another $50,000 for it. For that kind of house, $400,000 now becomes the asking price for that house. Rising labor and material costs, you would certainly be aware of all of that with the business that you're in. Lumber prices, last year you could get a 1,000 board feet for $600. This year, 1,000 board feet is $1,600. So you get the rising cost in materials and in labor. That is really adding fuel to this increase that we're looking at. And of course, there's a shortage of new construction. I mentioned that a little bit earlier. The one thing I think could dampen this would be if interest rates start to go up. It would certainly have some impact. But as long as we have the cash buyers coming in, there's still going to be, we'll see some significant price appreciation. I want to go on to commercial property. $17.5 billion, that's a 30% increase over last year. Median change on commercial is 11.5%. That's one of the highest changes we've seen in commercial since I've been an assessor, usually running around 5, 6, 7%, but this is 11.5%. And I might circle back to that. Personal property is $1 billion. There was a slight decrease. With the this new exemption that's going, or new bill that's going into effect next year, it would be $250,000 will be the exemption for commercial personal property. So total market value commercial is about $18.5 billion. New construction, certainly an important number. It is for us. And again, things have changed a lot just in the last couple of hours. But new construction, we could take the new construction amount times last year's levy, and we could increase our budget capacity by that difference. Well, that's certainly being affected by the new legislation, but I just point that out because new construction is important, and that's the reason why, because it affects budget capacity. With that having been said, this is new construction. This is the taxable value. It's $2.9 billion. That's up 40% over last year's $2 billion. Residential's up $1.5 billion. Commercial's up $711 million. And then we have new subs change of status. That's a good example of that would be if you had a piece of farm ground. It was getting the ag exemption. It now is going to be subdivided. It's changed. It's now going to be looked at as subdivided land. That would go increase in value. That's new subs and change of status. That's $740 million. That's up 60% over last year. We do know that the new construction roll is going to be reduced by 10% because the new law says that you get 90% of the new construction. So that's something right there that is going to reduce that number. Urban renewal is just under $3 billion. It's up 30% compared to last year's $2.3 billion. Tax burden, I'd like to just spend the remainder of the time, which is about 3 minutes, is on the tax burden. And this is one where I just said that everybody's talking about it, but most people really, it's really misunderstood. Most people, when you say, for example, residential is paying 74% this year of the property tax bill, compared to 26% for commercial. Last year, residential was 72 and commercial was 28. So residential as a group is picking up more of the tax burden than before. And it's easy to just think that there's something going on, that commercial is getting a break, and that's why this is happening. Actually, there's some pretty good reasons why we're seeing this divergence. And I say divergence, as we were in the recession back in 2008, residential and commercial tax burden was really getting to be very close together. But as we came out of that, there was a divergence where residential's burden is increasing much faster than the commercial. And I just want to point out that why I see that it's a natural phenomenon of the system we're working at. It's no one's getting one advantage over the other. But we have 193,000 residential parcels. So that's 10 times the amount of the commercial parcels. So first of all, we just have a lot more residential property than we have commercial property. Residential new construction we have 5,000 new parcels, 15 times the commercial parcels, about 15 billion, which is 2 times the commercial amount. So is how I look at this. There are two pieces that are driving this divergence. Is the sheer volume of residential property is increasing so much faster than commercial property is. But then also we're seeing residential property increasing in value so much greater than the residential property. As we just talked about, residential's up in the commercial property. Residential's up 26%, or commercial's up 11%. So that is what is causing this split here. And the last comment I would like to make about tax burden, there really is no optimal mix. I've never seen any study that says there's an optimal mix. So this is what residential should be paying and what commercial should be paying. So when people say commercial is paying too much or residential is paying too much, it's like, by what measure are they paying too much? So and I just say this because we need to be careful when we talk about tax burden. And there's no doubt that the residential property owners are really getting hit a lot because of the increase in value. But we would certainly expect levies to be coming down as the values go up. So, Mr. President, I'm just going to leave it right there. Those are my remarks. If you want more exact information on the numbers, you have that. And again, as soon as we have the new numbers based upon the legislation that was just signed, we'll be sure to get those to the clerk, and she can get those to you.
Bob, we always enjoy hearing from you, and thank you so much. And I know I speak for the rest of the commission, even if whether they want to tell you that in person or not. We look forward to this.
Yeah,
Well,
definitely.
that's very kind of you to say that. Again, you make me feel so welcome, and that's really appreciated a lot.
Absolutely.
All right.
Great. I have a couple questions.
Oh, we got a
I
question.
do, because I just love Bob's present. I can't wait.
As
Every
Commissioner Hanson
year.
always does, of course.
Always lots.
And the answer will always be the same. I'll get that information and get back to you. Let's try it.
Well, one's an analysis. Boise Dev did an analysis of this, expanded market. You said 13,000 homes, and, it's just phenomenal, the amount of things. What their analysis did, and we in particular, is that there's a huge player in the market now are speculators who will buy homes, mostly homes, but now they're buying up rental properties. And so they're on the speculation because of the increased demand for this valley and the ability to do at-home work, remote work, and so forth. Is there any way for you to judge what percentage of that and how much that is being driven? Of course, the West was subject to massive speculation by 100 years ago, interests, that's exactly what they did. They bought up all this land, from railroads and whatnot, held onto it and speculated it and tried to, is there any way you can do, as opposed to people who actually, direct buyers who were actually going to move into the house that they're buying? Can you determine that?
I don't have the answer to that question, and the reason why is it's not available. We have an analyst that I usually turn to, and I'll say, Alan, what percentage of the homes are being lived in as opposed, are being purchased for someone's residence as opposed to as an investment property? And he said he doesn't know that right now. There was that article that I saw where it was, I think 1 in 5 do not intend on living in the property.
Right. And it just totally makes sense if this market has been defined that way, that speculators from not just across the country, but probably around the world are participating in the market and artificially then creating those higher prices. Even for renters, where rents are going up too.
Oh, yes.
The other thing, of course, is we've come off of this pandemic, and this is only the 3rd week I've been working from this dais. So for more than a year, I was working from home, and so that has completely changed the notion of, well, there's residential properties and there's commercial properties, when an enormous number of residential properties were workplaces this last year and will probably continue to be workplaces. I just got my haircut at somebody's home because the commercial property, is still, it's easier to just do it that way. So what is the, are we going to be able to actually distinguish anymore? Are we moving away from that? And is there a better way to measure, what percentage perhaps of properties that are being used for income producing activities versus for just living in?
This leads to really an interesting question, and that is that by statute, to get the homeowner's exemption, 100% of the homeowner's exemption, the whole property needs to be used as your residence.
Uh-oh.
So if all of a sudden you decide to run your real estate business out of a den, we'll say that's 10% of the value. Strictly speaking, you should be getting only 90% of the homestead exemption. But I don't know how we would ever.
I was going to say, everybody in this county has been working from home. So
Yes, it's so interesting. Our
world.
appraisal staff hardly ever is. In fact, I think probably for over a year now, the whole appraisal staff has not been in the office. They're on a
There you go.
rotation where 1/3 of the appraisal staff comes into the office for a 2-week period. They take the time off and they just rotate like that.
So I think we're in a big shift that is happening, because we're also seeing that around traffic patterns too. People, if they have the choices, they're saying, well, I don't have to actually get on this road at 5 o'clock. And so then the question is, should we build it for the old pattern of everybody gets on that particular road at 5 o'clock when they have the option to work part of their day from remotely? And that a lot of people, I don't know if the analysis has been done, but a lot of people then actually moving here saying this is the climate, the lifestyle, the air access, blah, blah, blah. And all of their clients are, on the East Coast or in China or somewhere else, but they're working from here and they purchased properties here. And so our old models are, we project out, well, there's a home, there's 10 trips, we got to build a road anticipating those trips during peak hour.
Mr. President, if I could just add a follow-up to that. I know someone, he and his wife had just moved here about a year and a half ago from Seattle, and he retired. They live here. His wife owns a business in China, and she commutes and telecommutes. So you don't need to have an office building to conduct business in the area you want to be doing your business. It's a big change.
Yep, we are learning an enormous amount of what kind of infrastructure we really need to do to build in this area. Thanks.
Well, they're looking at the new assessor's office, and we were just talking about there that you probably won't need the same size that we've got right now because, again, most of the appraisers are able to work off-site, not on-site.
Yeah.
Anyway, we could go on forever about this.
That's right.
And I'd love to talk about it forever, too.
Thanks again.
Fantastic.
We'll probably talk more about it privately sometime. All right.
Well, thank you so much. And again, thanks for those kind words at the outset. I just could never tell you how much that means to me. Thank you.
Well deserved.
Oh,
It's good to see you all.
good to see you. You're the best. Thanks.
Hate to break your heart, folks, but that's the end of our regular
Oh,
agenda.
Commissioner Goldthorpe, we
Yes.
do have a public comments.
Well, I was just going to ask you about that. You
Oh,
got ahead of
okay. Mary Beth is in the audience, and I did not have my sign-up sheet, so.
Well, that's who I thought was behind that mask. So,
Yay.
Mary Beth, why don't you come up and... Pardon? Oh, you bet. I was going to invite you to do that.
Oh, thank you. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Great.
Being in person.
It's good to see all of you. Do I need to give you my address? My name's Mary Beth Nutting. My address is 5390 North Northwall Avenue in Boise, 83703. President Goldthorpe and the commission, it's so nice to see all of you. One of the items on your agenda is the discussion of State Street and Pierce Park. And this may seem a little premature because I know that they're going to be going out and having discussions with stakeholders and neighborhoods. But I just briefly wanted to share my experiences. My husband and I are bicycle commuters. We've been doing it for almost 40 years. We've biked all over the United States and up into Canada and Mexico, so we have a lot of experience in cycling. We live north of State Street. We live east of Pierce Park. We both work south of State Street, so we have to navigate our way across that intersection several times a week. And of course, we commute to work separately, and we take different ways. I prefer to take that intersection on my bicycle like I am a vehicle. And I will ride in the bike lane, but I will also cross the traffic lanes and into the neighborhood by Plantation. My husband likes to take the crosswalk and go over to the pathway, which is south, and then through the neighborhood. Occasionally we will bike together, and then we will have a debate on how best to navigate that intersection. And so a couple weeks ago, I decided I was going to try it the way that he said, just to feel it. So I was headed home from work. I was headed from, trying to get my directions right, south to north. I biked along the pathway. I came to the crosswalk at Pierce Park. I got the walk signal. I made eye contact with the gentleman who was driving the truck, and he was turning right from Pierce Park to State Street. Made eye contact. He saw me. I start heading across, and all of a sudden I hear this blaring of the horns. It was the woman behind him who was honking to tell him to go. But because he saw me, I continued to cross. And the woman actually apologized to me once I got across, which was very unusual as a cyclist. Usually nobody ever apologizes for putting my life at risk. So the reason why I bring this up is, if experienced cyclists are having a conversation on how best to get across an intersection or a street, that's a problem. I mean, it makes me wonder about the design. We shouldn't have to try to figure out how to safely navigate. And then, even then, with the woman who was blaring her horn behind and right and left turning traffic, that is really a problem for cyclists and pedestrians and people who are on wheelchairs. And so if a road is built, it's clear on how to get across it, but yet it puts your life at risk, that also is a problem. I looked at the old design that was being considered, and I wasn't even aware of it, but I noticed that it's going to have the U-turn, is that what they call it?
Through U-turn.
Yeah. And that then also alarmed me. So the fact that it's being expanded to 6 lanes, that there's going to be that turn, and that there's also a concern already in place at that intersection for both right and left turning vehicles, I am so concerned. And I will tell you, I'm not speaking on behalf of myself, because I will bike anything. I bike State Street, I bike Fairview, I am everywhere throughout the county. But for some reason, I don't know where people are going, but there's a lot of bicyclists and pedestrians and wheelchairs in that area. I don't know where they're going. I don't know if they're going to the Greenbelt, if they're going to work, whatever. There's a school in that area. So, honestly, I'm really speaking on behalf of them. That really is a dangerous intersection the way it is. And I am concerned, but I am confident based on conversations that I've heard all of you have. You've all had really great questions to ask about how do we make streets safe for all users. I appreciate the ACHD staff. I'm on the Bicycle Advisory Committee, and I have really liked the conversations that we've had from them. And biking in Ada County for the past 26 years, I will tell you that I have seen improvements in a variety of areas throughout the county. So I guess what I want to say, and I know I'm over my 3 minutes, I'm so sorry, but I just ask for diligence and mindfulness in making sure that that intersection is designed so that all users can safely use it. And I thank you so much for listening. I really appreciate all that you do.
Mary Beth, thank you very much. Let me
Thank
tell you
you.
what I got from all of this.
Okay.
And because you really know what you're doing on a bicycle, when you cross that intersection, if anyone's going to get hit, it's your old man, right?
Oh, I know, he was totally wrong. I was right on how to take that.
Okay,
I don't
just
care how
checking.
it's designed, I am right. So thank you for pointing that out, President. I'm going to tell him you said that.
Okay, I knew you would.
On the record.
Mr. President and Mary Beth, thank you very much for coming. Stay, because we are having a conversation, a presentation. There's Ryan right there, right after our update on the strategic plan, which we adopted about 6 years ago. We have this new performance measure, which you're familiar with. Now, I think the intent is that we don't sort of incorporate those for like another year or two, which I hope we can do a lot sooner, because that is the difference between saying we have to do these and actually having the tools in order to incorporate. It's a little like standing around a house for a number of years, coming up with some brilliant ideas on what the remodel has to happen, and then actually doing it. And 5 years later, you don't want to walk into the house and find out, well, they were great plans, you talked about it a lot, but you actually never did go in there and measure and change and alter the way that you hoped would happen. So that the key tools are those performance measures. And a lot of what you talk about is then saying, okay, we do traffic studies and we do level of service analysis on cars, but what we're doing, hoping now, is then we actually, not just what some would say your subjective way of your particular anecdotal experience on an intersection, but we would have a tool that says, here's what the level of stress would be for a cyclist. And it's such that most people, and you're not most people, would then avoid it because of the delay, because of the danger. And so then we say, well, what is the trade-off? Does that mean just a fraction of a second of delay for a car? Okay, maybe that's a good trade-off. So we then have the tools to trade off. But without that, we don't know what to trade it off, and so we don't. And so I would encourage you to continue to stay as we have these conversations, because this is where the sort of the rubber hits the road, as we've developed a really good, I think Brian's done a fantastic job, but here's where we're now going to say, okay, how do we make sure we start to actually take the drywall down and rewire a little in the way that we do things so that it actually works. I mean, it's not just, some really great things that commissioners say, but it's actually the change the way we do things.
Absolutely. Oh, yeah, I'm staying for all the presentations.
Oh, good.
I'm
Thanks.
excited about this agenda. Thank you again, President Goldthorpe and Commissioners. I appreciate it.
Very bad.
Thanks, Mary Beth.
All right. Is there anyone else? We're good. Then I will declare this meeting adjourned. And we will go into our work session, the first one of which is about our ACHD strategic plan. And Justin Lucas,
Justin's here.
Director Long, I'm sorry. I know, and he was going to stand up and remind me like I thought he was. and I was going to talk right over his head.
Done with all the work sessions, if you'd.
That's after the work sessions. Okay. We haven't had the director's report yet. You know how fond we are of that. Okay. Justin, welcome.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. Let me just get my, it looks like Ken's helping me. Thank you, Ken. It is on. I see a green light, Stacy. For the record, my name is Justin Lucas. I'm the Deputy Director of Planning and Project Management here at the Highway District, and today I'll be giving a brief overview of the ACHD strategic plan, which was adopted by the Commission in 2016. So just to start, well, first off, please interrupt me if you have any questions as we go. You know, we can make this as conversational as you would like it to be. And if I get going too fast, just tell me to slow down. So this plan, as stated, was adopted in 2016. It was about a year and a half it took us to put this together. It's a overview document. It's a guidance document. It was meant to provide kind of a planning framework and strategic approach for the Highway District, as you can see there. The plan went into common transportation values that we share with our partners. It talked quite a bit about the context that we find ourselves here in Ada County and the demographics, and you heard some of that today of what's going on. Goals and objectives. The strategic approach portion of the document discussed asset management at length. It was a deep dive really into our asset management needs. There was some financial forecasting and then action items that the Commission chose to include in the document. So this graphic, which is included in the beginning of the document, really tries to place the plan in context. And as you're aware, you know, we're a special agency, single purpose highway district, very unique. But we're not making these decisions in a vacuum. And that was one of the purposes of this document, was to show how ACHD can link its plans and programs into the larger framework that we have here in our county, starting with the city and county comprehensive plans. Those documents are, you know, there's a lot that goes into those. The cities and counties spend a lot of time. There's a lot of public involvement. And they really establish the land use vision, which drives, you know, what we are becoming as a county. Those comprehensive plans and the assumptions from those plans are fed into our regional transportation plan, which is called Communities in Motion. You're all very aware of Compass and the work done there. The demographic projections and transportation demand model are housed at Compass. ACHD doesn't have a separate process that we use to make those decisions. Those decisions happen at Compass. There's a demographic advisory committee where members of the cities get together and discuss not only where the growth is going to go, but how much they think it's going to be. I think they're pretty good at it. It's not an exact science. There's a lot that can happen, especially when you're in the second fastest growing state and one of the fastest growing counties in our country. So that demographic projection and transportation demand model was one of the major things that we leaned on. And the purpose of the strategic plan was to better link those larger, broader documents to the very specific documents that we have that are related to transportation investments, which are our capital improvements plan, our integrated 5-year work plan, our annual budget, and then all the needs that we have and have discussed on a regular basis with you as we update those documents. So what the plan did, it was obviously intended to support ACHD's vision, mission, and priorities and act as an umbrella and a link between these documents that I've discussed. Back in 2016, we were in the process of developing a capital improvements plan, and this plan linked directly into that. And the demographic projections and revenue assumption process that we used in 2016 was basically replicated in 2020 when we updated our CIP again. We didn't update the whole strategic plan in 2020, but we did use the same principles and thoughts as we went into that 2020 CIP. It did certainly memorialize ACHD's commitment to asset management. And as you've seen in our budget presentations and the integrated 5-year work plan, ACHD is absolutely committed under the direction of the commission to maintain what we have and keep it in good shape, because it's just a lot cheaper to do that. And that's just that's just not what ACHD believes. That's national practice, national standards. Anyone who digs into asset management quickly realizes that you got to know what you have. You got to kind of figure out what the right cycle is to take care of it. And if you do that, you're going to save money. Because fixing something that breaks is a lot more expensive than trying to keep something maintained and going well. So it did certainly highlight unique opportunities and areas of concern that ACHD was facing in 2016. Many of those things are the same. Many challenges are the same. I would also say many challenges are different. Since 2016, I think the economy has turned in a direction that we didn't fully anticipate back then, how much and how fast things would come back. I also think with the pandemic year and all the things we've discussed, and you just had a great presentation about that, there were some unknowns back then, and we're now living in the middle of that environment. And then it established clear actions to help ACHD allocate its resources correctly and try to find that balance between the different challenges and opportunities that we face. And one thing I really like about the plan is it does establish a benchmark. We can now revisit it. We can talk about it like we're doing today, and it gives us a format to have some discussions about these policies. What it doesn't do, and I think this is important, it certainly doesn't regulate the ACHD Commission's decisions. You, through the annual budget process, through the integrated 5-year work plan, through your actions on an annual basis, on a weekly basis, have the ability to shift and pivot. There's nothing in this plan that locks anything down. Certainly changing direction is important, and we have to be flexible as an agency, especially with changes to technology, changes to demographics, changes to the economy. We need to be responsive to those things. It also does not restrict your options when it comes to revenue. We did some revenue projections back in 2016. I'll show you what those were, and I'll show you where we are today at a high level. We weren't exactly right, and I'll be totally honest. It was a different time. We were emerging from the Great Recession. I think there was some pessimism on how fast things would come back then, and a lot of the work we were doing was in 2015 when I bought my house for a lot less than it's worth now. So there's just a lot of changes that have occurred out there.
Mr. President?
Yes.
Justin, is that why some of the performance goals are not like time bound? There's just some that say maintain, which I understand, but then there's some that say, let's do, update bike ped infrastructure and level of service and level of stress, but there is no time bound metric on there.
Mr. President, Commissioner Pickering, it's a good point. I think at the time when we were adopting this document under the direction of the Commission, there was a desire to set out a framework. There wasn't as much desire to establish timelines to achieve some of those goals. At the end of my presentation, I will show you many of the things we have done since 2016 in direct response to the discussions that came out of the strategic plan. And I think that might help answer that question.
And I'd be curious to know what you think is where it is appropriate then to assign more optimistic metrics of like what we hope to accomplish. If it's not in this document, if there's other things when it comes to that kind of a bigger scale to communicate that to the community.
Mr. President, Commissioner Pickering, I think there's options for the Commission in that arena. This is one document we have, and if there was a desire at some point in the future to update it, certainly through that process we could have further conversations about that for sure.
Thank you. So,
population growth, the blue line you see with the dashes, I didn't change this. This came out of directly from the plan back in 2015/16 when we were working on it. You can see we're up over 500,000, trending above where we thought we would be. And that's kind of the point I wanted to make with this slide. Also, projecting forward to 2025 and beyond, I believe we will continue to trend above if we stay on the trajectory we are. And I could have said that in 2006, and then in 2008 the bottom fell out. So I mean, we don't know what exactly is going to happen. What we do know is that the desire for people to move to Ada County, even through the Great Recession and all the things that have happened, has not waned, and we don't really expect it. And you can go. Compass does a lot of deep diving on this. There is no expectation that we will see a significant decrease in demand for people to move here. It seems to be only getting more. And there are tipping points in demographics that are fascinating. If you look at places like Phoenix, Las Vegas, Salt Lake City, where they were at one point kind of like this area, and then there's these tipping points when you get to 1 million people, and then how fast it took you to get to 1 million, sometimes to get to 2 million, it happens even faster. So there's interesting things that happen with demographics as you study those trends. And this area has a lot of land available for development. It has a international airport and a lot of other things going for it when it comes for why people may want to live here.
Mr. President, Justin, then use the same trip generation models? You just assume models from the past, you just add more numbers to it? Or have you had to revisit the type of trips and the time of trips and the model apply to those larger numbers or not?
Mr. President, Commissioner Hansen, it's really an excellent question. Compass actually does a scientific survey to determine how those inputs go into the model. And it actually is, they reach out and send people a travel journal, and people actually write down where they're going, what they're doing, how they got there, the different types of trips. And so that's something they do on a, I don't think they do it every 4 years. It's just not coming to my mind. I know with the new census, they will be doing a new travel demand survey. So that goes directly to what you're getting at, Commissioner Hansen, of the demographers and the people that work on the travel demand models want to use the best data available, which comes out of that actual reaching out to people who travel, and then those statistically are incorporated to the larger population. So system growth is another factor, kind of high level, that we look at. And you can see, once again, the blue, red, and yellow lines on the screen were projections of system growth that we did in 2016. We are trending above the high, which was a 1.5% system growth metric. You can see we're at 5,219 lane miles. I believe we'll be above 5,500 lane miles by 2025. I think looking at what's happening out there now, and no real sign in the next few years that it will slow down, we're on our way to over 5,500 lane miles. And it's interesting to see the highway district in this way of, you can see what happened in 2007 and between 2007 and 2013. That curve flattened quite a bit during the Great Recession. And here we are coming out of that, and even through COVID, and it's picking back up similar to the historic growth pattern. And so there's a lot of interest out there of will we continue to see that higher bend on the curve, or will we see something different?
And Justin, I think I remember back in 2016, we told you to take the middle line, right?
Yes, Commissioner Goldthorpe. Back then, as we looked at this, we used that middle line. We called it the medium scenario, 1% system growth, as kind of our metric to project our maintenance needs going forward. We were wrong. At least for these first several years, we've been well above that. Will it average out over time? I don't know. We just have to wait and see. But this is why benchmarking this is so important, because now we can kind of look back and go, okay, here's where we thought, here's where we are. And you're seeing a lot of that through the recent presentations related to operational capacity, maintenance funding, maintenance needs. It's driven by this. It really is.
Justin, I have a question on that slide,
Sure.
though. Are these percentages, 1.5 and 1%, where did we come up with that number? Are those linked to Compass as well?
Commissioner Pickering, it's an excellent question. The high trend at 1.5% was really based on that historic growth trend, so that the older section of that line that has the steeper curve. And so we basically said, well, do we think we're going to return to that and go high, or do we choose something lower based on kind of a middle ground between what was happening and then what we saw happening during the Great Recession? we chose that middle ground. It turns out that we're actually, it seems like back to where we were before the Great Recession.
And then, I mean, just a clarifying question then. So we're talking system growth in terms of the lane miles that ACHD has put into place, right?
Lane miles that are built primarily by developers and when ACHD widens roads. So the majority of ACHD's lane miles, Commissioner Pickering, are constructed, they're residential roads that are constructed by the development community.
Okay.
New roads are primarily residential roads.
Yep.
Yeah.
So, Mr. President and Justin, it's a long-term strategic plan vision. The notion that we can't go west into Canyon County or east into Elmore County. In fact, we can't go into the federal lands where there will be no development in the foothills. So once, whether we've thought this through, once we've allowed all the areas to be filled in and we've reached another plateau simply because there's no more places to build lane miles, will population stop, or do we then at that point measure the efficiency and the use of the existing lanes to move more people? In other words, our goal is then to build it all out and accept the building out of the whole system first, and then go and look at how do we help people move within the existing infrastructure, or do we start with an analysis of the existing infrastructure and how to help more people move on what already exists, move around the valley? So my assumption is our strategic plan is moving us in the direction of we will just fill in and accept until we physically don't have any more places where we can build more lanes.
Mr. President, Commissioner Hanson, I appreciate your perspective there. The strategic plan doesn't specifically speak to that. It doesn't state that ACHD's goal is to build out Ada County. The building out of our county is not really in ACHD's control. It's primarily driven by the decisions made by our land use agencies. Now, I do get what you're saying, and I do believe ACHD does both. I think we are carefully looking at the existing infrastructure, and you see that with all of the things we bring to you when it comes to upgrading sidewalk facilities in existing neighborhoods, upgrading the ADA requirements, and things that we have out there. I think there's a lot of work ACHD does in those areas. Obviously, a lot of the work we do with our signals and our ITS work and all those things. That being said, there is still, in this county, a lot of undeveloped land. And there are a lot of roads that have never been touched. They were built as section line arterial roadways many, many years ago, well, long before ACHD ever existed. And those roadways are not urban roadways. They have no curb and gutter. They have no pedestrian facilities. They have no bike facilities. They're just 2-lane farm-to-market roadways that were built not to accommodate urban traffic. And you struggle with this every day, and I understand that, of what do you do with those roadways. That is the majority of our system still. The majority of our arterial network is still, to this day, 2-lane, rural, farm-to-market roadways. And the question is, how fast are we going to get there? When are we going to build those roadways? It's driven by the decisions of the land use agencies. And you see this as those projects come to you. Areas where when I moved to Ada County, people weren't even talking about, CUNA in the way it's being talked about today, or STAR and the development that's happened out there. And if you look at a map of how we've grown, the area where I live in Northwest Meridian, it didn't exist, in the early 90s. It wasn't, there was just farms there. And now it's thousands and thousands of homes, thousands and thousands of people. And so those are challenging questions. And I know that the commission, talks about that and thinks about that. One of the purposes of the strategic plan was to help facilitate those discussions. This is another thing that we carefully monitor, and I think it represents some of what Commissioner Hanson was discussing, and kind of provides visually what we have going out there, which is an eastern portion of our county, primarily in the Boise, city of Boise limits, some of southwest Boise, where the roadway network is older. All those little red lines represent mostly residential roadways that were built before 1987. And then you have in the western and southwestern part of our county a lot of green and yellow, which is that newer roadways, especially that green. If you look at what I was just mentioning, a place like Northwest Meridian, it's all built since 2000, almost exclusively. And so as a highway agency that covers the entire county, we have a unique responsibility and I think unique opportunities to look at these areas a little differently. And they are different. And we have to realize that. They're different from an asset management perspective. They're different from a pedestrian and bicycle perspective. They're different from a lot of different perspectives. For example, all of that green, most of those neighborhoods were built with sidewalks. So getting around those neighborhoods, you don't hear a lot about people worried about sidewalk connectivity in their neighborhood in those areas because they have sidewalks in their neighborhood. Where we hear it most is from the areas that don't have that when those neighborhoods were built. Much of that happened before ACHD even existed. Those were just older standards where things like that were not as carefully considered.
And if I could, Mr. President, that development models in those two areas are very different too, because the older neighborhoods without sidewalks, because they're gridded, you have a lot more movement of traffic on those local roads. There are people who don't live in the neighborhoods, whereas the model of development on the west side of the county is a neighborhood where largely it's just those people who live there. So they're very, I don't know if you apply level of service to those local roads, but it's like level of service A++, because hardly anybody uses it except people who live there. And then the other local roads and the gridded networks aren't, because they're gridded, that people have that option to drive through and use them to connect to other parts of town. That's the other sort of flip side of that development pattern, right?
Yeah, there, Commissioner Hanson, President Goldthorpe, there are certainly different development patterns in our county, and they play out on a daily basis. Much of that is driven by the comprehensive plans of the agencies. Specific to your example, Meridian had policies associated with disconnecting its collector network back when much of this development was being put in. Many of those policies have changed over time, but that's an example.
It's too late now.
Well, many of these neighborhoods, they are what they are today, and we get there's people that choose to live in a neighborhood for various reasons, and we don't necessarily know all of those. So really the plan attempts, and I say attempts because this is a challenging area to find the right balance between what is needed to maintain our system and what type of enhancements are needed to our system. This plan went into a very deep dive into those 5 asset categories, and I'll show them to you in just a second. Primary asset categories that we have, and trying to establish basically a focus of here's what we need to do for these 5 asset categories to get to a baseline and to keep our heads above water on asset management. And then we can start thinking and working through system enhancements. Obviously, it happens on an annual basis. You're doing both. We're doing everything all the time, but finding that balance is a critical conversation that we have to have. So just to go through those 5 categories: pavement, bridges, sidewalks, traffic signals and materials, stormwater facilities. I didn't change this from 2016, but you can see pavement, ACHD for many years has had a very robust inventory and management system. We use a nationally recognized measure called Pavement Condition Index, and we have values and scores. In 2020, we just updated our whole system associated with that. And so I would say current condition is very good, and that's one of our metrics, and we report on that. And oftentimes people think, well, that's only for the cars. Well, I don't think that's necessarily true. Anyone using the pavement, whether it's a cyclist in our bike lanes that happen to be on the street, a bus, a school bus, all of those users benefit from good pavement that's not full of potholes and cracking and all those things. Bridges, we once again also have a very detailed database associated with our bridges. We do annual inspections on many of our facilities, and our condition speaks for itself. They're in very, very, very good condition, and so those get a green light there. Sidewalks back in 2016, you can see it was yellow. We struggled a little bit with our inventory. We were working through some things associated with ADA. I think if you had to ask me today where we stood on that from a tracking perspective, I would move that to green. We've made a lot of progress in that area since 2016. We updated our ADA transition plan. I think our current inventory is very, very good. And we know it's not perfect, and there's challenges in the area of sidewalks because they change a lot. There's tree roots and things and all kinds of stuff that happens. But I think we're on a really good track in that area. Traffic signals and
Mr. President, I just want to ask you about sidewalks. So our analysis of the sidewalk is the physical condition, not whether people perceive them as a safe place to walk. So if they're not detached, they are attached to a busy road, people don't use them. And we've raised this issue is that, we've got all this inventory of sidewalks that people don't use. Why aren't they using it? Well, because they're perceived as unsafe. But your analysis of the asset management is that we got to maintain them whether they're being used or not, and that we don't have this separate analysis, at least until we have some sort of performance analysis, so we can't distinguish which ones we really want to invest in and which ones perhaps we don't even need to care about because we're never going to see people wanting to use that corridor.
Mr. President, Commissioner Hanson, I think you're right. I mean, the focus of this specific category is condition. I would say that we can't ignore pedestrian facilities that we have built. Although they may not get a lot of use in some areas, once we build a pedestrian facility, we do have an obligation to make sure that facility meets minimum ADA standards. And that's a lot of the feedback that we've gotten from the Commission in previous year, just recently, is when we're out there doing maintenance projects, we need to be thinking about exactly what you said, is looking at holistic projects, updating those facilities. So this in no way is intended to say that all we care about is the condition on the sidewalks. We have entire programs at ACHD, and what you'll hear from Ryan later today, talking about, I think, the usability and the comfort. They are somewhat separate, but I think they intersect quite a bit also. So, yeah, thank you. Stormwater facilities continue to be a challenge at the Highway District. We have a good GIS inventory. Do we have a comprehensive approach to addressing our stormwater facility needs at the Highway District? I would say not yet. I think we've made some progress since 2016. This is an area of regulation, environmental requirements, and a lot of other things that are challenging. And unlike a lot of our other facilities where you can go and just see them, stormwater facilities are largely underground, at least historically, which makes them a lot more difficult to know what kind of condition they're in. But we have made progress with drones, with other things where we're sending remote vehicles and things like that into these facilities to do more checking and inventory. So continues to be a challenge, and we're working on it.
Justin, just a quick comment. I would love to know more about how to improve all of those things with stormwater, because it's just such an important piece of our overall infrastructure and our environment and our river and quality of life. So love to know more.
Commissioner Pickering, President Goldthorpe, I'm not the right person to give that presentation. I don't even know enough to be dangerous on. So, but we do have experts here at the Highway District that have a lot of knowledge in that area. I'm sure at some future point we could provide further details on that. So from 2016, one of the things that we discussed quite a bit was a resource allocation methodology. And this is the methodology that was contained in the strategic plan. I pulled it right out of there and put it on the screen for you here. And you can see that primary and secondary focus discussion, which we've brought back multiple times. You can see pavement, sidewalks, bridges, asset management, and then roadways and intersections. Since 2016, due to other conversations related to revenue and constraints and impact fees, this is where we stand today. And you just saw this, I believe, last week, which is the Commission-directed capital allocation methodology. We revisit this every year with the Integrated 5-Year Work Plan. So what we started in 2016, which was adopted in the strategic plan, we have brought it back to you every year with the Integrated 5-Year Work Plan for discussion. And this is where we are today. And you can see the one kind of change is that we highlighted this concept of meeting ACHD's programming obligation. Previous commissions have asked us to do that, focus more in areas where making sure that we're not losing those obligations that we have committed to. The ADA and environmental compliance being large parts of that. the VRF ballot commitments, safe routes to school and congestion relief, and then general fund support to the impact fee collections, which we have discussed at length about how our major capital projects, a portion of them is paid for with impact fees. There's also a portion that has to come from the general fund. And that portion that comes from the general fund is largely paying for the pedestrian and bike facilities that go with that project. So on revenue, this was an interesting slide. I hadn't looked at this in a little while, and I brought it up and thought, wow. I think we were pretty pessimistic back then in 2015, 2016. You know, the commission was struggling with, at that time, whether to take 3% plus the new construction, and there's a whole history behind that, and I'm not going to go into that. But previous commissions have not always chosen to do that, and there's, you know, obviously there's financial consequences associated with that. You can see a period of time where ACHD's adopted budgets were growing, but at the same time, our revenue, that adopted budget was actually not new revenue. It was drawing down reserves. And so we weren't increasing revenue. We were basically drawing down the savings account. And so although there was an increase during that time period, it wasn't due to taking any new revenues. So with all that conversation, we did some work trying to project what it would be. Based on the commission direction at that time associated with property taxes and other forms of revenue. We kind of flattened it out and then brought the curve back. The red dot generally represents where we are today from a new revenue perspective. It doesn't include carryover and some of those things that we do in our budgets, but this kind of gives you that idea of we're in that 120 to 130 to 1 range right there. So we're above where we thought we were going to be. House Bill 312, which was state legislation that came into that gave us some money. There's been a few other things. And then the biggest things probably have been impact fee collections coming in way above what we thought they would in a few of those years leading up. So we're trending, I would say, pretty well from a revenue perspective. Higher than we thought we would be in 2016. At the same time, the needs and the requirements and all of the things we need to do have also increased. And so I'm not going to get into exactly where we are today, and you as commissioners discuss that at length often, but there's a lot of challenges that continue in this area of revenue and really being able to accomplish all of the things that ACHD wants to accomplish. This was a slide, and there's a lot of talk about the X slide or the crossover slide. We did an analysis, and this is obviously outdated, but the principle is what I want to focus on, which is we did an analysis back in 2016. If ACHD maintains a flat revenue scenario, and our capital maintenance and our operational needs continue to grow, what happens to our ability to expand our roadways and intersections or our ability to have money available for other major capital projects? And you can see the blue line representing kind of that capital maintenance need growing over time, and the red line representing dollars available for roadways and intersections. There's a significant interplay between those two things. So the ultimate conclusion we come to is that without increasing our revenues, it's going to be very difficult for ACHD to continue to enhance our system. I mean, that's just the basic idea behind it. And so stagnant revenues are difficult. At the staff level, we always bring to you needs and requirements, and then ultimately the commission chooses how to move forward from a revenue perspective.
Justin?
Yes.
Having seen this particular slide many times, I notice a slight trending to the right, and I assume this is because of the growth impact fees and stuff like that that's actually given us a little bit of a breather.
Yeah, we do, I would say, because of some of the revenues that have come in much higher than anticipated, that crossover period, that idea of, we always knew it was a range of this, 2023, 2024 timeframe. I think you could state today with some confidence, if the economy stays the way it's going and the commission continues to choose to increase revenue, yeah, we're seeing that pushing out. Part of the outcome, one of the outcomes of this strategic plan was, since the strategic plan was adopted, the commission did take a much more aggressive approach to revenue increases on an annual basis. That was one of the outcomes of the plan.
I think back in 2016, when we looked at this slide, we would be right where the crossover point was at that time.
So these are, and these are moving targets, and revenue is a hard thing to project. It's based a lot on what Mr. McQuade talked about today. And so we do our best to project it, and that's why you can see the lines kind of, they're shaky because we know, and then they get curved and kind of flatten out as we don't know. And the further we go out, the less we know when it comes to projections. So some of the conclusions that came from the strategic plan, obviously funding for asset needs need to be monitored and adjusted based on performance measures, and we do have performance measures for each of those asset categories. Dollars available for enhancements become scarce if revenues remain stagnant. I think that's a clear conclusion from the plan. The ACHD CIP requires a commitment to fund congestion relief projects and match impact fee revenues. That is one of the things that comes with your adoption of a CIP. We're making a commitment to build those projects. And then finding the right balance can be elusive, and that's why I'm here, because it does shift over time, and we need to continually work with Compass, with our financial and fiscal partners, the cities, and as we through our major plan updates, we need to be talking about these items, which I believe we do a pretty good job of doing that. I did want to focus on some outcomes. So we did have our CIP update and adoption in 2016 that followed the strategic plan. Integrated 5-year work plan, prioritization updates, revenue allocation, a huge discussion in 2017. You'll remember in 2018, we had a lot of discussion our facility expansion plans and our operational capacity analysis. And I would just like to thank the Commission for implementing many of those recommendations that we made in 2018. And here we are today, I'm still talking about some of those recommendations about our need to shift our abilities and increase our operational capacity, not only in the maintenance area, but across the district. Ballot measure vehicle registration fee increase in 2018. Unfortunately, that was unsuccessful, but there was a push by the Commission at that time to pursue a ballot measure to do that. And that sunsets, I think I'm going to say 2029. I think that's when it sunsets. If I'm wrong, I'm sure someone will yell out the right answer. We adopted a revised and updated bike master plan in 2019, a revised and updated ADA transition plan in 2019, focusing once again on these areas that the Commission asked us to. Pavement management program update in 2020, CIP update in 2020. We've continued our neighborhood plan process, and today you'll be talking about our Livable Streets performance measures that ultimately is an outgrowth of the strategic plan, because in that plan we discussed the need to expand our ability to measure our system in all kinds of different ways, and this I think falls under that umbrella. So with that, I'm glad to take any questions you might have. I guess I can go back. I probably took too much of your time today, but I love talking about this stuff. Thank you.
Thanks, Justin.
Thanks very much, Justin.
Thank you.
I have a question. Of course. Sorry, Justin. I was just really curious, when you're putting this together, what type of external research or, best practices do you rely on to help kind of meld all this together to inform this approach?
Mr. President, Commissioner Pickering, thank you for that question. I'll go back to what I said earlier. ACHD is a unique organization, so we don't have the ability just to look at another countywide highway district and say, well, how do they do it? Or how do these other 15 countywide highway districts deal with these issues? So direct, sister agencies or something like that, we just don't have them. That being said, many of the principles and practices that are come out of this plan are based on guidance documents from FHWA, our federal agency that kind of manages overall transportation in our country. We rely a lot on the Transportation Research Board, which is a professional organization of traffic engineers and planners and transportation professionals that provide a lot of scholarly articles and other statistical research associated with transportation. So a lot of the themes, especially associated with asset management that you see here, were drawn from documents that talk about best practices associated with those areas. When it comes to relationship management and some of the interesting items in the document about how we work with our partners, much of that is driven by the commission. And I actually have up on my wall from 1996 a strategic plan that ACHD did, and a lot of those same concepts of regular joint meetings and working with our partners and open communication were discussed in 1996, and they still continue to be kind of foundational ideas that the commission relies on to get feedback. I will say that our integrated 5-year work plan process and the annual process that we go through to update that document, I would hold that up against any process in the United States when it comes to a transportation agency working with its partners to try and gather projects, develop them, and turn them into reality. I think what we do in that area is, I think we provide a lot of leadership, and a lot of other organizations across the country have reached out to me to talk about how we do that, how does that work, how do we balance all the needs. So I'm very proud of the work we do in that area, and I think we are leaders there.
And then I just have one last question, comment. So on page 17 of the actual strategic plan, you talk about outreach tools. With, the pandemic and more entities relying on innovative online type forum tools to get participation, I was wondering if there would be any room to include, because this is something that I personally would love to try with a land use partner, participatory budgeting or other really cool platforms that could increase our outreach, but also giving kind of the tools and ability for residents to weigh and vote on what projects they would like to see. So that's just kind of a little nuanced comment that I'd like to make a plug there. And if there's any opportunity to expand that language, I would be supportive of that.
Thank you.
Thanks, Justin. We'll now take a 5-minute break.
Good information.
No, we have that over too. Does it have better?
Click on project.
Okay.
The strategic plan is still
That's
overarching.
too high level.
So-
Okay.
2 weeks ago, the budget. It is in yellow.
And back by popular demand, have Ryan Head.
Rarely do people demand I talk about my work, so most of the time at my house they just go to sleep.
Well, how are your children?
Oh, fantastic.
All right.
Commission, President Goldthorpe, Ryan Head, Planning Manager here at ACHD. It's my pleasure today to present on our Livable Streets performance measures, as well as our implementation actions. This is all in anticipation of an adoption hearing by resolution on next month. So with the commission, we reviewed the draft criteria back on March 31st. And really, I'm grateful to have Mary Beth here because she was part of that subcommittee of the Bike Advisory Committee that really helped drive this criteria.
Is she still here?
I
I don't think so.
Bruce is here. isn't she?
And
Close call.
look around.
Hold that thought.
Well, okay. Well, hopefully she'll hear this. I was very grateful for the help of that committee, really, in driving this criteria.
Oh, there she is.
Shout out.
Shout out again. Really, the benefit of those committees is they really wanted to provide something that was practical, useful, and would help ACHD move this work forward. And so the selected criteria was a level of traffic stress for bikes and for pedestrians. We worked closely with them, and really it's considered and falls in line with best practices in this area. I'll tell you, commissioners, that we've already begun using this. We've been using it, begun making it useful in our practice, and as we develop the scope statements for projects, as we begin looking at project designs, we've been using this pretty heartily, and with confidence that this will move forward into an adoption. So, but we'll say that's where that box comes into play, is that the context and the existing conditions do have an impact. You know, one of the things that we looked at, I think one of the things that was really focused on as we were developing this criteria were those arterials and collectors. But when you get down to a local street, maybe the size of the buffer was not necessarily the same in some of those things. So we've tried to make sure that we looked at this and provided some adaptations to be able to use that. And from that, we come out with really a recommended measure for all different modes. We have the level of service that comes to play from our capital improvement plan and has the guidance and criteria there. And then we have the bicyclist and pedestrian levels of traffic stress. What I've highlighted here in the orange is really what's the goal? What are we trying to achieve in these areas? Really, from the CIP perspective, we try and get an E, but if you can get a D, that's great, right? From the bike and pedestrian perspective, we want to achieve the highest level that we can, but you're really trying to shoot for those higher levels, and really that's what the intent of the note there is. When you're in a built environment, making progress towards the highest level and towards the goal is really what's considered success. We're trying to make it better for all users. And then this is the part that wasn't in what you saw on March 31st, and that's the implementation actions. We've met together as leadership throughout the district to identify kind of what are those ways and the places where we can bring this into effect. And there's a number of things that we're happy to report that are already ongoing, right? We expand the scope of our roadway maintenance, that comprehensive maintenance strategy, where projects we're looking at going at once, right? Go into an area, look at all needs for all users, and try and address that. That's been the commission direction, and really that's moving in this direction as well. At the commission direction, we've established multi-use paths and raised or protected bike lanes as the standard facility for arterials and collectors. Looking at moving it off the road surface and out of that road surface. We're already in the testing phase for a sweeper that can be used for protected bike lanes. That's on the maintenance side. We're developing typical drawings for best practices for the raised bike lanes and multi-use paths at intersections, some of those details that were a little bit fuzzy because we weren't using these types of things, and how do we build protected intersections and other types of things so that it's better for all users. The interim policy for multi-use paths with development, that's another recommendation that really aligns with this. And then, as you met today, our bicyclist and pedestrian coordinator really is the person who will be tasked with monitoring how well we're doing at implementing these facilities, and we'll be making the recommendation for bicycle and pedestrian infrastructure with all our projects. As far as new efforts and things that we would continue to do to bring this into full practice with the district is, one, we just need to train, right? We need to train our staff that what these measures mean. This is new, and train all of our project team members and what we're trying to achieve and what's the goal here. I mentioned that we're already kind of doing this, but developing projects that meet the desired performance levels, right? And as we scope a project, let's put that into the process so that we're building these things. Really, the strongest place where these measures take effect is in design. It's in design of facilities. And so when we're designing something, we want to make sure that we're taking that into account and trying to achieve that highest level possible. And when not possible, we document that, right? We document and say what makes this challenging and why can't we do that in this case.
Right.
We also have been reviewing and at your direction have also modified a number of design efforts to bring them more in alignment with what these standards say. The fourth bullet there, yes, I can count. Fourth bullet there under the new efforts. Really, we believe with the comprehensive maintenance strategy, with having a performance measure for all the different types of users, that now's the time that we can begin to talk about a cross prioritization system that takes projects into account from all the different modes. You just saw in Justin's presentation, we do have programming obligations that we'll always take into account from a financial side, but from the selection of projects, we believe you can look at these in different ways. Some might be looking at projects at the neighborhood scale and letting the neighborhood drive the priorities. It could be looking at different ways that we can look at the benefits for all users from the different types of projects that we do. And so we think now is the time that we could begin working on developing something along those lines. And that would be something we would try to get completed by this fall so that we could use it for the next update of the integrated 5-year work plan. The next piece really is, it's going to take a little bit longer, but we do believe that we need to do a comprehensive review of our development policy and to see where you can build this into that policy so that when we're reviewing developments, we're taking into account the level of traffic stress for bikes and pedestrians. We already do it for vehicles, so this is an opportunity for us to take a look at that. And so policy rewrites take time. It takes time to review those with different committees and end users and different individuals, but that's part of this. And really the last piece there is the catch-all, and that's to look as we identify other policies, other different components that where this would affect, and those will continue to pop up over time. We'll take that into account. And we really believe with having now, and thank you for the bicycle and pedestrian coordinator, she's on my team and I'm very grateful for that, that we have that tool or that person who can really monitor this through full implementation.
Mr. President, I just have a quick question, if I could, Ryan, before you go off this slide. So your focus is on reviewing section 7200, and of course, at the beginning of the year, we looked at all the sections. I think it was 7100 is traffic studies. Is there a reason why we can't incorporate it at the same pace in other sections? And we're just going to modify this. That's my first question. It's like when we ask for traffic studies all the time. We are constantly asking for traffic studies. Why wouldn't we incorporate that at this time when we're asking for traffic studies so that we are using the same and comparing data? And I think that's 7100, and there's other sections that refer to level of service for cars.
Mr. President, Commissioner Hanson, you've made that last bullet effective just now in that you identified another policy.
There-
So I think in the process,
And-
we can include a review of that as
Yeah.
well. That's
And-
not, it's not intended to be exclusive. We
Okay.
7200 is where the primary development criteria is in our policy manual.
Great. Well, I'd love to have it in 7100. The nerd in me has read all those, and now they all merge together. But the other is, wonder why we couldn't do that sooner than the winter. Is winter 2022? Is that this coming winter, or is that the following
I
winter?
think our intention is that that's this winter.
This coming winter. Okay. I
January
always
to
never
March
do,
timeframe,
because
that
winter
was
starts
what
in
we talked
December.
about.
So I thought, oh, what? So okay,
Yes.
that's
See, so those 3 months this winter.
fourth quarter,
There you go.
or
We'll
first
take it.
quarter, I should say, first quarter of the fiscal year. Thanks.
That is the intent. I will let you know
Okay,
if
thank you.
it's something different.
Thank
I'll
you.
review
And
that with our
Ryan, if I
development
could for
services.
just a second, I would, a word of advice for the rest of the commission that isn't quite familiar with the process. Between now and the winter of 2022, I would suggest that in order to be as collaborative or to produce as much good stuff for all this as we possibly can as a commission, I'd probably get to know Section 7200 a little better than perhaps we do now.
Excellent.
Yes, yes.
So as far as adopting this document, one of the things I'm looking at this that staff would like to recommend is that simply that we include this as part of our transportation land use integration plan. This document was adopted back in 2009, 2010. Currently has those 4 components in black there: complete streets policy, cost share ordinance, master street map, livable streets design guide. Those documents are the overarching kind of guidance that we have that have led us to build bike and pedestrian facilities as well as complete streets for all users. And so we believe that's where this should be couched as part of that, as an addendum to that document. And that's where we will be recommending that be adopted by resolution as part of that plan. Now, getting into kind of the next phase, implementation. What does this look like, and what are some things out? And this slide's a little busy, and I'll walk you through it. First of all, transition periods. Transition periods are tough. When you have old infrastructure, new policies or guidance, how do you build this into play? And I'll show you an example of this in just a second about why it's a little bit tough to work through, and we'll talk through that. The second really is to reflect on the evolution that we've experienced over the last 10 plus years. The types of infrastructure we're talking about now were not even in consideration back when we adopted our first bike master plan and the transportation land use integration plan. We've been adopting neighborhood plans, and those have evolved as we've started with our first neighborhood, and we're coming to the end of that cycle, and we'll have 17 plans to go back on that have identified projects and needs. But we'll start a second cycle to start looking at this. But really, one thing I'd call out here is really when we adopted that first bike master plan, it was really to build in the ongoing assumption that we would build bike facilities and really bike lanes on all arterial streets, right? That was really the base assumption. And those bike lanes on arterial streets tend to be for the strong and experienced cyclist. And that was what the focus was. That's what everyone was asking for at that time. That's what our bike advisory committee was asking for. Really, as you look at it now, 10 years later, the conversation's more about providing infrastructure for all users, for all ages and abilities. And that's really what these performance measures are meant to do. Now, that may not mean that those all ages and abilities infrastructure may be loved by the strong and confident, right? If you take someone and put them off of the road on a multi-use path, they might not like that as much as being in the lane. And we recognize that, but this in working with the Bike Advisory Committee, that was the recommendation, is that be who we're focused on building infrastructure for. But I just want to call that out, because we may have some naysayers over time who say, well, why are you building this infrastructure instead of that? And it doesn't work for me, who would take...
We've already had some of that, and to the credit of this process, we've had those come to our defense pretty strongly, so I wouldn't worry too much about that.
Perfect. And the last point there is really the value of partnership. ACHD has limitations in what we can and can't do, right? And just to use as an example, there on the bottom is a visual of what where a raised bike lane is, and our kind of the standard buffer that ACHD can do. Typically it's hardscaped, but with that buffer space, using the metrics, your sidewalk actually doesn't then achieve a level of traffic stress 1. It's still closer to the road than would be necessarily comfortable for all ages and abilities. When you add in landscaping or other infrastructure, those vertical elements that you've heard presentations on, really it begins to change the scene. But in many ways, a lot of those vertical elements are not necessarily things that are in ACHD statutory authority. And so that's where that partnership will be key. For us to achieve those highest levels, we are going to have good coordination and partnership with the cities and other jurisdictions.
Right, and I just wanted to say, I think that was I really appreciated this visual and that explanation. I think this is going to help further those conversations with our key partners that, hey, if we really do want to build this infrastructure that works for everybody, then we need your help with that. So great job.
Thank you. So now let's get into a practical application of these performance measures. Our example here is Victory Road between Meridian Road and Locust Grove. Under its current condition, so these measures can be applied in many different ways. You can apply them little tiny pieces by piece, or you can look at the segment and kind of the weakest link is what the rating is, right? So in this case, right now, it's operating at a level of service F for vehicles. Right there I don't really have a way to point there. Right there in the kind of center section, it goes down to 2 lanes, and the volumes there and that threshold would trigger it being a level of traffic or level of service F. For bicyclists, because you have in that same section between Glacier Bay and whatever the street is on the right, I can't read it this small, you don't have bike lanes. You have bike lanes everywhere for the first half mile on the west, or the western half mile. And then that last section there closest to Locust Grove will be rebuilt in 2022 with the Locust Grove and Victory intersection. So we're saying in our minds that's going to be done, but there's still that section that doesn't have a bike facility in the middle. And there's also 2 little gaps there that are not accessible or they don't have sidewalks in them as well.
Mr. President and Ryan, so I assume the level of service F on vehicles refers only to the peak hour, because ironically, that's where I went to get my haircut this morning, and I was there at 10 o'clock and didn't have any problem driving along that section of Victory. So I assume that's at the peak hour, whereas the level LTS for pedestrian bicycle is not specified at a particular hour of the day, right? So that's the distinction.
Commissioner Goldthorpe, Commissioner Hanson, you're correct. Our level of service standards are set by peak hour, according to our policy. So, but one thing I guess I would point out though, a few years ago, the commission entered into a cooperative development agreement with the developers of this area and actually built out that first half mile as a 3-lane road with curb, gutter, detached sidewalks, and bike lanes, which looks like this at this point in time. So even though we're saying it's LOSF, because of that weakest link, there are portions of this that would be under our current standards built out. So if you were to look at this as to what could we do then to finish this road, it's in our CIP to build this out to 3 lanes. What would this look like? Well, if we were to build it out to 3 lanes through the entire length of this, it would only bring it really up to a level of service E for in the peak hour. But from a bicyclist perspective, one of the things to call out is the speed limit is currently 45 miles per hour. An on-street bike lane with a 45-mile-an-hour bike facility is an LTS 4. It's really still for that strong and experienced bicyclist. From a pedestrian perspective, assuming we are able to still detach those sidewalks as we've been able to do throughout this period, that would get you an LTS 2 for pedestrians, but that's also still driven partly by that speed of 45 miles per hour. But this is typically what our practice would be. We'd complete what's been started, right? Let's finish. You have this section that that was already built out by a cooperative agreement. The commission's worked with developers, and this has all been worked out. And so part of it would be considered done. You could rebuild all of it to meet the standard. You'd still have the same vehicle level of service. It would be a LTS 1 for bicyclists if you were to, make it a raised bike lane or a multi-use path or something along those lines. You still, though, because of the speed limit, would be at an LTS 2 for pedestrians. But that is at a significant cost, right? To rebuild the infrastructure that's already been built, that's and probably wouldn't be what staff would recommend be done. So one of the things these measures give us kind of the tools to look at is, what are some of the other options? We could look at just building that LTS or building out the 3 lanes, putting the on-street bike lanes. But then if we're going to try and achieve the a safer environment for all users or a more comfortable environment for all users, it's what can we do to address the speed limit? And really, you can't. We've talked about you can't just change the sign. It doesn't usually work that way. And so, this could be opportunities where we could find, are there ways we can work on getting a landscape median in partnership with our land use jurisdictions? Are there other vertical elements we could get that could visually and could affect people's desire to go at a certain speed that would allow us to bring that speed limit down and then would make a more comfortable environment. So this is kind of the way this tool works in practice. It gives us kind of that desire to think outside the box to say, how can we trigger this, achieving a higher level of, or a better level of traffic stress. So that was the example I wanted to share with you. Really, at this point, our intent is to start next Monday and open this up for about a 4-week comment period, review period by the public as a document before we bring it back to you at the end of June. We'll have time to take any comments into consideration as we review this. But with that, I'll stand for any questions.
Ryan, I would bring up, if you went back a slide, there at Observation and Standing Timber, 3 years ago, we had a rather interesting conversation brought to our attention by a citizen who lived there on the north end of this slide, where the buses were picking up the kids on the wrong side of the road, so the kids had to walk across lanes during the peak hour just to get on the bus, and fortunately the school district fixed that. But now we also have a really good hawk signal there at Standing Timber and Observation, that because we got several of our partners to include that on their priorities, went from being nowhere to completely built this time last year.
Yeah, Commissioner Goldthorpe, in looking at this, I was looking strictly at those segments, but those crossings would be something we'd also be looking at at each of these locations, and this tool provides the ability to evaluate those too, and would have recommended something along the lines of what's already been done there.
And also all that empty space to the south, it's all filled in now.
Yes, it is.
Go ahead.
Just one quick comment. Ryan, thank you for this great presentation. Thank you for your work. I just can tell how passionate you are about this and just your job here, and I just really, really appreciate it. Great job.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ryan.
Mr. President, I want to echo the same thing. I've seen Ryan and a lot of people working so hard on these, and they understand that the way in which the community decides how to build out their developments, this will help them to decide. Decisions about placing commercial and other development, which has had a tendency to face away from the neighborhood towards the arterial and a big parking lot, as we recognize connecting with people who can walk and bike to their business reduces the demand for them having to use single occupancy vehicles, and also recognizes that, okay, the one asset you could say we have in a lot of these neighborhoods, while there's low traffic on these inside local roads and high traffic on the arterials, there's a real opportunity through the connected bike and walkways to make sure that happens. People don't want, once a neighborhood's built out, connect the road. So they're all disconnected. Maybe we're lucky if we have a mid-mile collector. But then by saying, look, we have this way of analyzing how we can help people move around in this neighborhood to get to the businesses that are in and around the outsides. And then the main thing we have to do, rather than invest, on maybe some piece of that corridor, is the crossing of that corridor from one part of the safe, low-stress bikeway, walkway to the other side. And so then it becomes a much more doable thing. We just need a safe way to get people across, and then they connect to the rest of that network, at least for the next mile. So I think it's a really good opportunity, and I think the more we can help our land use agencies understand this is where you need to be thinking, instead of developing these older models where you have a gigantic parking lot facing the street. It's like, wow, this is our customers. These are the people that are going to come and spend money in our business.
Thank you very much, Ryan. I look forward to the comments that the public has.
Thank you.
That feedback. I think that's going to be really important.
All right, and now our last work session, and I hate to characterize it as anything but equal to the last two. We have no main event today, but we will have our annual presentation by our maintenance staff about this year's chip seal. As you remember, last year's was a very short presentation.
Going to say that just so President Goldthorpe, commissioners, just by way of introduction, I did want to set the stage to say where we were at this point last year, making a decision it was a very challenging year and very difficult decision to make, but because of the pandemic, we opted to forego the chip seal season. We are so much more optimistic this year. Things are looking fantastic on that front, but it's not all rose-colored glasses. We do still have some challenges to overcome. As far as coming out of the pandemic and hiring challenges that we have both internally and with our critical partners for flagging, as I believe the director mentioned last week in his report. So the two things that I really wanted to say before I introduce Lloyd Carnegie is, first off, thank you for everything that you've done for us to ensure a successful year this year, as far as the manpower and the equipment that you've provided to us. And then secondly, just knowing that the key to success this year is going to be flexibility. So we have goals that we want to meet, and we're going to work aggressively toward those, but we do recognize we're going to need to be a little flexible and move as the realities and those things that are out of our control do tend to dictate. So with that, I'll introduce Lloyd Carnegie. He is our maintenance manager, and then he'll be doing the presentation with support of the superintendents.
Thanks, Jennifer.
Good afternoon, President Goldthorpe and commissioners. My name is Lloyd Carnegie. I'm the maintenance manager here for ACHD. With me, we have Scott Frisbee, which is our superintendent of Cloverdale, Rich Shaw, which is our superintendent of Adams, and Heather Fiddle, which is our superintendent of Ustick. And we're really excited today to present to you our 2021 chip seal program. Next slide. Before we start, we do have a short video we'd like to show you about the then and now of chip seal. Have to bear with us, we had to make some slight changes. I'm sharing the...
You might have to escape out of this slide.
Have to share your screen, not the presentation.
Well, it sounded exciting.
It does, yeah.
So the video in opens up a new window.
Mm-hmm.
So that it's not sharing the same screen. And I have a dual screen.
Oh, darn.
Sorry, unfortunate that video did not work.
Riding around in the breeze, well, it's alright. If you live the life you please, well, it's alright. Doing the best you can, well, it's...
They do have country western music for all the chip seal crews.
There'll be background music.
Isn't there a requirement to dance on the chips to?
It helps orient them, yes.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
Right.
So a lot of one of the main important questions that we always get is why do we chip seal? So chip sealing provides a maximum return and benefit for the taxpayers of Ada County and helps maintain our very good overall PCI rating for our roads. Our life cycle curve, which this image dictates, is cheaper to do preventative maintenance now than to do reconstruct later. As you can tell, our chip seal costs are roughly 22 cents a square foot compared to a mill and overlay cost of $1.71. So that's over 7 times the cost to do a mill and overlay compared to just a chip seal. So we can do multiple chip seals versus a mill and overlay. So the moment a road is paved, it begins to deteriorate and the asphalt oxidizes. It becomes hard and brittle, which causes cracking and eventual failure of the roadway. So the chip sealing slows the oxidization process by sealing the road and creating a new wearing surface. It also waterproofs the road and prevents base failure. Next slide. So this is a quick overview map of our 6 preventative maintenance zones. This year we're going to be in Zone 2 South, which is the green area. So we'll be from the I-84 South to Lake Hazel Road, from 5 Mile West to McDermott. Our goal is in each year we do a maintenance zone, and we will chip seal all 100% of the arterial and collector roadways within that zone and 50% of the residential roads. So this equates to every arterial and collector roadway being chip sealed once every 6 years, and our residential roads being chip sealed once every 12 years. So as the saying goes, no plan survives first contact with the enemy. So and therefore, maintenance has devised 2 plans to ensure we have the most successful chip seal season. So our plan A is a very aggressive plan and is in place should all resources and supplies be in place. We'll have 2 chipping crews, both Adams and Cloverdale, and they will start on June 1st and will be completing 100% of the arterials, collectors, and residentials that were planned for this year. As we are aware, in today's environment and the challenges we may face regarding temporary staff and our flagging staff, we may need to go with Plan B, which is combining both an Adams and Cloverdale into 1 chipping crew, starting June 1st, and prioritizing the roads as that we will chip. So our plan is to do 100% of the arterials and collectors that were identified, and then 50% of the planned residential roadways. This ensuring that we will chip seal the roads around the schools, all the newly paved roads, again to provide that sealant that it needs, and the roads that were not chipped during the last chipping cycle that we were in this zone. The Deputy Director of Maintenance, Jennifer, will be making the call on which plan we will proceed on May 19th, and when the Commission will be briefed on that decision.
Lloyd, how much hope do we have that the governor's announcement yesterday with regards to unemployment benefits will help us?
I couldn't answer that. I'll let the director.
Yeah, to be determined.
I asked a hard question for once. All right.
Mr. President, Commissioners, again, that announcement takes effect on June 19th, which is well after the procedure is, so I'm not holding much hope on that. Now, that being said, as Jennifer will, or Lloyd will explain, in the Plan B, we can move up depending upon what the current conditions on the ground are at that time. But right now, I don't think it's going to be a factor.
Well, I would hope folks that were dragging their feet about getting another job might realize that there's going to be a big rush after the middle of June, and maybe they ought to cherry pick some stuff now. And I think we're offering pretty good money for this work.
A lot of the positions we're waiting for are usually they wait till the last moment to get hired on, so that's why next week will be the decision point of where we're going to be at.
Okay.
Next slide. So a brief overview of this year's chip seal. Total anticipated cost is $7 million, and it'll take roughly 25,000 man hours to complete all the chip seal. We have 467 lane miles of roadway planned. That's 320 lane miles of residential, 129 lane miles of arterial and collectors, as well as 9 lane miles of auto seal. Should we go to a Plan B, the arterial collectors and auto seal will stay the same, but our residentials will be at 169 lane miles, which would equate to 307 lane miles total, should we do a Plan B.
May I ask a question? What's an auto seal?
President Goldthorpe, Commissioner Kinney. It's a more robust aggregate, larger size aggregate than our regular chip seal, and it's used for roadways that are more rural and have high truck traffic, and it provides just a more robust sealant on those roadways.
Oh, okay, thanks.
So I'd like to go over just a quick overview on the process of chip seal. So this picture here depicts kind of the chipping process. Our sweepers will go before this train and sweep the roads about 1 to 3 days before. This is a very crucial step because we need to have a clean surface for the emulsion to be applied to. If it's not clean, it has a chance to peel off and then have chip loss. So we have to make sure that those roads are swept prior to our chipping. After they've been swept, the oil is placed by a distributor, and the amount of oil placed is determined by the lead worker in the field based on the road surface condition. Dump trucks then back into the chipper box to provide material for the chip spreader. And I do want to take this time to thank the Commission for giving us the ability to purchase our new chip spreader last year for Cloverdale, which we'll be most excited to use this year. The chip spreader then will spread the chips evenly over the oiled surface. And then right after the chip spreader becomes 3 rollers that will roll the chips, not to compact them, but more to orient them into the oil so that we have the most oil onto the chips and less chip loss. Another crucial part of this process is our flaggers for the safety of our operators and equipment as well as the safety of the public. We have a flagger truck that goes in front of the procession that moves the traffic off into the other lane. We have a flagger that goes alongside our line to make sure no traffic comes in. And then we have flaggers at the back that also keeps traffic flowing where it needs to go. As you can tell from this photo, we do chip seal in the opposite direction of traffic. We do this for 2 reasons. It's safer for operations to see where we're going and the traffic that's coming at us than having the traffic behind us, as well as with our dump trucks after they load the chip spreader. It is easier and safer for them to move out of the line and back into the traffic going in the same direction as traffic. Next slide. So after we chip seal, we generally allow about 3 to 5 days for the oil to cure before we sweep up the excess chip and then place a fog seal coat of oil, which is shown here in this photo. So the fog coat covers and seals the chips, but also creates a clean canvas for our paint crews to make new markings on the roadway. So our preparation for chip seal doesn't just happen a couple weeks prior to chip sealing. It is a several-month process. Actually, back in October, November, our crews were already out doing the minor repairs to the asphalt and concrete curbs in preparation of this chip seal. Then our fleet group started back at the January 1st, looking at our equipment, inspecting them, testing them, and doing all the repairs required to the equipment to ensure that come June 1st, they're up and ready to go, and we shouldn't have equipment going down on us. In April, we had a coordination meeting with several internal departments, as well as some external agencies that will help coordinate this chip seal process. So we met with our traffic, Idaho Asphalt, which is our current emulsion supplier, pavement management, and GIS. And what we do is we go over the plan, the roads that we are going to be chip sealing, what projects are out there, what special events may be coming up, so that we are all aware what needs to be done and how we can strategize our plan going forward. We do share our presentation with the Boise Meridian Police Department. We like to keep them informed of where we're going to be and what we're doing, because they do field a lot of calls, and sometimes their events may coincide with where we might be, so the more they know, the better.
Gee, they ought to have a couple of their guys out ticketing everybody going over 40 miles an hour, too.
If they want to.
Save a lot of windshields.
I was going to say.
Last week, we did have our chip seal postcards mailed out. So residents that are in the affected area should be getting those in the mail. This is to inform them of what our plan is, the roads that we're going to be chip sealing, what is chip seal, as well as provide them phone numbers that they can call if they have more questions, or even links to our webpage for other interactive maps and information as well. We met yesterday with the Ada County Sheriff's Office dispatch. They do field a lot of our phone calls of angry citizens on the roadway, so we like to keep them informed of where we're going to be, what we're doing, and should they have some questions or situations they can't deal with, who they can contact, because we work in partnership with them. We're meeting today with the commission to give you our brief overview, and then later this afternoon we have our second meeting, a coordination meeting, again with traffic and permits and capital construction, because plans do change, and so we like to keep that communication open as to what projects are out there and any special events that we may not be aware of. So our schedule, June 1st is our official start date, weather permitting of course, and we'll start the first half of the day doing refresher training with our operators and our leadership staff, and then the second half is a soft start. The operators get the equipment out to the field, we start doing some hookups, some test runs, and it's just a soft start for that first week. Our plan is to start with the auto seal on that June 1st date. The July 4th holiday week, we take that opportunity to not do any chip sealing operations, but we bring all the equipment in, we do any repairs, we do any recalibrations that we may need to do, and we also take the opportunity to have our annual safety stand down, where we review any incidents that have happened over the year, our current game plan, and how we can go forward for the rest of the year in a safe and the most effective manner. Our estimated completion is August 31st, and after it's a successful chip seal program, we'll have our chip seal victory party on September 16th, which you are all invited to attend. Another big part of the chip seal is communication, communication internally, externally, and also with the public. So to do that, we have the postcards, as I mentioned earlier, that we send out to every affected residence in the area with the information for phone numbers and websites that they can look into for more information. We do daily updates to our ACHD webpage, as well as RETA. And again, we are in close contact with the dispatch center as to where we are, what our plan is for the next week, so that they know what kind of calls they may have to field.
Lloyd, question for you. Are any of those postcards, do you guys plan on having Spanish on those postcards, or like a sentence that says, you know, for Spanish, click this link? Are you guys going to have anything like that on those outreach materials?
President Goldthorpe, Commissioner Pickering, we do have, I believe, a section in Spanish that they have a phone number that they can call to get that information in Spanish.
Perfect.
But I definitely could look at it to make sure we do it for future years.
That's great. Thank you.
We do have an interactive map that is on our webpage. This map's very informative. It shows all the roads that we have planned to chip seal, and then shows when those roadways have been chipped, to when they have been swept after they've been chipped, and then when they have been fog sealed, which is the completion of them. So at any time, residents or yourselves can go onto that webpage, that interactive map, and see exactly where we're at and the progress we've been making for the year. We'll be using social media, again, to inform the public of what we've been doing. Communications will also be putting out 2 press releases. One will be on the decision of Plan A or Plan B, and the second one will be a couple days just before the official start, just to remind everybody that we're going to be out there and we're starting and we're excited to get this program done. And we'll also be doing 3 blogs, basically on the why, how, and when of chip seal. Here's a very detailed map of our Zone 2 South, showing all the roads that we're going to be chip sealing. It's hard to dictate it on this screen here, but the light blue in the top left-hand corner is our Cloverdale group, and then on the right side, right lower, is our Adams group. Adams will be starting in their northeast corner and working their way southwest. And Cloverdale's plan is to start in the northwest corner and work their way southeast. So we welcome all of you to, by all means, come out, see the operation. We'd love to have you up on the chipper box or even in one of our oil distributors, and come see the crew as they're working. And I will stand for any questions.
It's great. Mr. President, yeah, I just highly recommend, if you haven't been out on the chip sealing equipment to go. The other is that we can't communicate with our neighborhoods more than, and so go the extra mile, communicate out. The one thing you'll hear back is from the brand new streets. And there's always pushback. They say, this street is only 2 years old, or this street is only 1 year old. Why are you chip sealing it? So you need to understand. I didn't understand, and there's still some areas it's like, oh, I'm still not sure. It's mostly to do with the routes. So anticipate those questions, because you will get them. There will be people who call you up and say, why are you chip sealing this street? It was just built, last year. But get that information up front so then you can help navigate this. This is probably the most efficient use of our resources that we have, and we're going to continue to expand it. So it's fun. But those neighborhoods, you can't tell them enough, because, oh my gosh, at least it goes through fast. It goes through quickly. And so the more they're ready for it, the better. So
Jim,
dive in.
I might just add that there are other benefits to sealing a newly redone road, and that has to do with some major addition to the longevity of that new road.
And they just need to know. If the neighborhood association leadership already knows that and can answer those questions right off the bat, boom, on next door and those sort of things, a whole bunch of questions get answered, and then everybody appreciates it.
Mr. President?
Yes.
Lord, a couple of questions, and this is kind of for my own information. It appears to me in some places that chip sealing goes around manholes and such, and in other places it seems to go just right over them. What's the standard mode of doing it? Does it just cover over everything?
President Goldthorpe, Commissioner McKinney, when we chip seal a road, we put what's called doilies over each manhole, and so we chip seal over top of these doilies, and then when it's done, we pull the doilies up, and the manhole remains without any chip on them.
Okay.
So it might be the odd time they may be missed, and we try to identify those and then clean them up.
All right. And so that must be what I've seen. There are places where it looks like here and there a manhole cover got just completely chip sealed over. Is that also the case with things like water valves and such that are in the road? They also get blocked out so they don't get covered?
Yes, they have the same doilies. And sometimes it's just we miss picking up the doily, so it's easy as just going out there and pulling off the doily.
Right, okay. All right. Well, this is my final comment is just kind of maybe a suggestion. I don't know. It might be worth the district putting large signs or murals or something on every single vehicle involved in chip sealing that says something along the effect of don't complain about the chip sealing, we're saving millions of tax dollars, or something like that. We could do something in the public relations way that might help to assuage some of the complaints, because I know we get complaints all the time.
Well, I figure I didn't do my job last time, because when I ran for re-election, someone actually ran against me because he hated chip sealing.
Yeah, well, and right, lots of people aren't aware. They just see that the rocks that get inevitably kicked up and windshields get cracked and things like that, and I always tell people, it's a little bit of a pain, but boy, it saves millions and millions of dollars. So anyway, anything we can do in the public relations realm to help the public understand that, I think is worth doing, at least if we can find some simple ways to do that. Thank you.
Thanks,
Yep.
Lloyd.
Thank you, Lloyd.
I may take you up on a ride.
And now,
Okay.
now we will hear from the director on his director's report, which we have been waiting for.
No, we deferred that till next week, Stacy. Yes.
May is still in motion.
Oh, we need a motion?
No, I say May is in motion.
Still in
It is in
motion.
motion. I'm gonna say what?
Well,
Yeah.
This is May. We're halfway through.
Well, commissioners, again, I don't know about you, but I continue to be very humbled by the professionalism, the talent, the commitment that your staff has on every issue that we work through. I'd like to, I just received this note here from our team over at Cloverdale. It goes like this. This afternoon I received a call from a woman who was reporting that there was a duckling that went into the drain. She only saw one go in and the mama duck was unseen. When the drainage crew arrived, come to find out there were 11 ducklings in that drain and all returned to their mama safely. there is a good world, especially when these guys that put in the work and show up when they need. So that commitment goes across all avenues, all ends of every one of your team members here at the Ada County Highway District. It's absolutely amazing. And we will be tracking duck saves as we go through the year. That's one of the big things that that Jennifer and the maintenance team look at. Just very quickly, a couple administrative things, and I'm going to jump into the meat of why I'm in front of you today. First off, it was a very tough day yesterday on the interstate. We had 5 major accidents on and around the interstate between 7:45 and 5:15, 5:30 that involved 5 or more vehicles in each one of those accidents. As of this afternoon, there were no fatalities. However, there are some citizens that are in intensive care on this. The accident at 5 Mile, there's no such thing as luck at an accident and such, but we're very fortunate that that accident did not occur directly under the 5 Mile overpass. And I'm sure that the media has discussed about all the things that went on, but it was just a tragedy. And it had to do with one person making an aggressive turn, speeding, which caused all the others. And the others were inattentive driving as we went forward, so that's difficult. I met with Cynthia Gibson this morning to talk about her idea on painting an intersection on Eastman and 14th, I think it is. Had a great discussion. I'm going to go view that intersection this week, and I think we'll be able to support her and the neighborhood on doing what they'd like to do as a community program with children, the neighborhoods to paint that that intersection. Of course, as we've done this once before, I will be speaking to the folks over at Boise because they're going to have to accept a lot of the responsibility for this going forward. But I don't see much of an issue with this. And then finally, from an administrative perspective, I did send out the approved ACHD Boise joint session agenda to you all. We'll keep you posted. And again, Commissioners McKinney and Commissioner Goldthorpe, the request is from the mayor is to have you on site on the dais at City Hall. I will have both our briefers plus Stacy as the clerk and myself at City Hall. Everything else is going to be via Zoom for the rest of the commissioners and for the rest of the staff and stuff. That's their request. And we'll go through that.
So it's at Garden City Hall?
Boise.
Oh, Boise.
Boise, okay.
Yeah, on May 20th. And we'll send you plenty of updates as we go through this. Commissioners, there was, let me get into the heart of my discussion with you today. This morning on the early bird, you may have seen a title of a news presentation that was made, and the title was "Finding Employees Demands and Offering Candidates the Very Best Experience," according to the Boise HR manager.
Was that at the car wash?
This was they were just speaking on everything across the board, and as you know, and I've been in front of you for several times now, we've been providing you what I'm going to call a peek under the table as we walk through the budget process on what we will be coming to you with recommendations. Of course, your decisions will be executed as you determine those things. But this session is going to talk about people, and as you know from our right up there, our priorities, we value people very here at the heart at the ACHD. And the market conditions right now, as you know, are crazy. With the April inflation rate, I don't know if you caught that this morning, at 4.29%, which is very, very interesting here. As you heard earlier, property taxes are interesting, and they're going to get more interesting going forward. And rent is up, food prices are up, gas prices are up, and the daycare is approaching a mortgage payment when it's all said and done here. Very interesting, very difficult. And as you all know, and I've been in front of you several times this now, ACHD is not immune to these new challenges regarding economic, personal, post-COVID challenges and decisions. And as I said from our vision up there, people are our priority. And I've said multiple times to all different organizations here at the Ada County Highway District, We view people as profit centers, not cost centers, when it's all said and done, because of the tremendous things they do, to include duck saves, and chicken saves and goat saves and all those other great things we do. So, as such, I'm going to suggest to you that we must continue to be bold. We must continue to be innovative, and we must continue to be flexible in proactively addressing and responding to the challenging environment and retention environment that we continue to face here at the Ada County Highway District, as all employers are doing. As such, Commissioners, I am sharing steps that I intend to take within my authority. And I always believe in briefing the Commission first before I take those steps in my authority. I've found that to be a very good thing to do in advice. And recommend additional considerations for you, which is well outside my authority, for your considerations as we go into the next coming steps for your budget and integrated 5-year work plan, culminating with the budget August 25th. First off, so immediately, again, my intention is, due to the 20-plus openings that we've had here at the Ada County Highway District for some time now, they're not always the same, and we fill a lot of them internally, which means we never catch up. We have people cross-flowing and being promoted and those sort of things. We estimate by the end of this FY that we will have approximately $720,000 in unused, already commission-approved salary funding. So that's $720,000. As such, but specifically excluding me. I want to make sure I emphasize that. Excluding me. I will be reallocating a portion of this reserve for an immediate 3% across the board salary adjustments for our team members, because we are below the power curve at this point in time. The cost is approximately $200,000, and that's for the rest of the year. As noted, it is budgeted for, and it is commission approved under the personnel account, and it is within my signing authority, and you have already delegated that responsibility to me under the policy procedures that we have here. But I think it's very important to start this process to ensure that we are, again, trying to catch up, but as I said earlier, across the board, excluding me. In October, and that's within my authority, in October, I will be recommending an additional COLA, commensurate with the current market conditions and inflation index. Again, budget increases, taxes, the 3 to 7% increase in prices, labor market, those sort of things. I'm not going to make that firm recommendation to you today, but as we get closer to the your budget decisions, based again on market conditions, retention, recruiting issues, you will see on top of what I'm about to do, a COLA again for the group excluding me on these sort of things. 1 October, I'm also going to recommend that the ACHD establish a targeted annual longevity incentive bonus for critically staffed professional positions here, CPAs, engineers, lawyers, based on current market positions. There was an article that just came out while you were in session. There are several senators at the national level that are already looking to do this in different parts of the world. I think it's going to be important because your competitors, our competitors right now, are already working down that path. And as you've seen, based on our updates, we have great people. And those great people are being looked at by all sorts of different things on all aspects, just not the professional areas, but all aspects. So this is going to be something new. It'll be in front of you. It'll be your decision. But I think it's important as we look into this new world that we are all facing from an operational perspective that we do have that targeted annual longevity incentive bonus specifically targeted at critical staff positions, not across the board, and stuff, but staff positions. As I said, the amount would vary based on the position and the duration of the program, the budget, very important, the budget, and again, market conditions.
Christine's taking frantic notes.
Oh, no, she doesn't know anything about this yet. She's just going, what the hell is he talking about? We're still on the air, aren't we? Oh, sorry. Anyway,
I couldn't see her face, but I could see her eyes.
Well, they're going to get bigger. I'm not done. I'm going to recommend that ACHD establish a signing bonus for critical positions for the professional staff. Again, this will be under your authority, but at the end of the day, if we're going to be competitive and if we're going to maintain and retain the great talent that we have and attract the right talent, we have to look at this from a business perspective. And I know this is a little strange for government operations, but ACHD is known for being strange in government operations. So that's something that I'll come to you about. Maternity leave. Currently, ACHD leave policy pays for 2 weeks of maternity leave full-time. Then we revert to about a 6-week short-term disability. And of those 6 weeks, 2 weeks is the waiting period. And in those extra 4 weeks is the, I think we pay about 66%, or they pay 66% based on our insurance. And then after that, it's you take PTO and such. What I'm going to recommend to the Commission is that ACHD established during the budget process a 12-week fully paid maternity leave period, policy period.
Is this going to be like with the Family Leave Act?
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, but period. Father, mother, don't care. I think that's important. Again, not only in establishing us as, again, one of the best, which we already are, but maintaining a good edge on market conditions across the board. That'll be in front of you. Also in front of you, I talked earlier about daycare approaching a mortgage payment. I don't have to worry about that, except I have 379 fellow people that I am awfully worried about, plus the 5 of you, on a daily basis. But I'm going to recommend that we explore, and I don't know how we can do this yet. I'm pretty confident we've got the right path, but exploring some type of contribution from ACHD through our flex spending plan, where we can make a stipend contribution that people can put into their accounts that will help offset. Now, we cannot, I did look into how does ACHD build its own daycare center. Ain't gonna work. I looked into on the side, can we just contract out? No. So the issue is, one, if you even find an opening for our parents here in this new paradigm that we have across the thing, I think it'll be very important from both a retention and a recruiting and the right thing to do perspective that we explore how we leverage our current flex spending plans to include a daycare. More on
That's
that
a
as we
use it
go.
or lose it benefit, right?
So, yes.
Okay.
October, as I shared with you before, and I made this recommendation, but we're moving out on it, and that's to establish the Intern to Hire program with CWI, Boise State, Idaho State, for designated career fields. I mean, we've got survey, welding, traffic, engineers across the board by contract, based on qualifications that we bring in the interns in their second, third, fourth year, whatever it is. They are on contract with us, and at the end of that, based on qualifications, based on them meeting all the criteria, they have a guaranteed job here at the Ada County Highway District for X number of years. I think we have to establish, and this is different outside, but we have to establish that pipeline for those critical resources that we believe, you believe is important to continue the operation here, because right now we're getting picked dry basically when it comes to traffic engineers, engineering, those sort of things, project managers. We're doing great, but at the same token, it's becoming more difficult. Although ACHE does have a Veterans Preference Program, trust me, we do. We hire great veterans here at the end. I'm going to establish, this is within my authority now, an enhanced Veterans Priority Program. Effective immediately, veterans are guaranteed an interview with the district for whatever position they're looking at. We're going to emphasize, re-emphasize veterans hiring priority when it comes down to CDL drivers. Today, we actually will bring veterans on if they've driven heavy vehicles. Without a CDL, we train them, we provide, and we help them get their CDL. I think this has been lost a little bit in the pandemic areas. We haven't advertised that enough, and right now.
Do we do that for others besides veterans?
Not at this point.
Why not?
I don't know. It's a great question. I'll look into it. But I think it's one of the things that we need to emphasize, because this is the time of year when both Mountain Home Air Force Base and Gowan are doing their transition assistance programs, and people are starting to look around. And as you know, there are a lot of help wanted signs all over the place. And we are going to establish a veterans priority point for hiring consideration. Another thing within my authority, and this is very difficult, it took a lot of contemplation on my part, but I'm shooting for 1 August to, again, do the labor markets involving dynamics and emerging personal choices that people are making now based on coming out of the pandemic. And I've shared a couple of those things with you in the past for career considerations. I will migrate to ACHD operations where we can to a hybrid work from home program. I'm calling it 3-2, 3 on site, 2 at home. Now, there are going to be a lot of restrictions on this, because to me, we're a service operation, and you can't be a service operation if there's nobody at home. I mean, at the desk. You can't do that. And it will not impact all of our people. Jennifer's team, probably not. Operations, no way. Traffic ops, no way. Inspectors, probably not. But we do have some critical, we have other areas here in the district where this can play, and I understand the word can. The issue why 1 August? Well, we're going to have to reevaluate all our positions. To make this legal across the board, I'm going to have to ensure that we have those positions specifically tagged when we advertise them, or we're looking at here that says remote option possible on these things. We're going to have to train our supervisors. Now, they've done a tremendous job during this pandemic of keeping things going. I mean, it's humbling us, but in new paradigm, I think we have to make sure that everybody understands, how do our supervisors lead people that are in a hybrid position, and how do they balance the I want to go on Friday? Yeah, I want to go on Friday too. How does that work? So we have to set that criteria before we walk into this. The standard I'm going to set is, if you're working from home, you must work from home. And what that means is, you better darn well be available by a phone call. And such. Yes, sir.
Bruce, I've had some interesting conversations along those lines with folks in the private sector, and they've gone everything from telling me how well their remote work has done to just getting almost angry, saying I've just let them all go on vacation.
Mm-hmm.
So I thank you for that.
Absolutely. And the other part criteria of this, Mr. President and Commissioners, is that, I hate to say it this way, but if I pick up the phone, somebody better answer it as we work through this. Because again, we are a service operation. We support the public. We support all these different organizations across the board. Pajamas and TV are not my idea of a 3-2 when work. But this is something that is in my authority. I'm willing to take the risk on this, again based on the evolving criteria and career choices. But same token, we're going to have a lot of sideboards on this to make sure that the taxpayers are getting everything for their dollar invested.
Mr. Director, yeah, now, I think the flip side is also true, the tendency of people who are workaholics and they never leave the work. And so part of HR's job needs to be, to help people leave work even though they are technically still at home, and not be available when they're not supposed to be available.
Absolutely.
And so that's the interesting balance, because I think we've seen both instances, and the tendency is, okay, well, I know you're at home, I'm going to make
you have a very dedicated group of team members here at Data County Highway District and such. And, we have our on-call team members, we have our on-call, I just have to pick the phone most 99 times out of 10, one ring and someone's there when it's all said and done. This will be something for you, next consideration. I'm going to recommend, I am recommending, that ACHD begin matching contributions to the PERSI 401k. Other organizations do this. I don't know why we don't. Now, there are...
Have you checked already?
Yes.
Good.
Yes. Okay. And so I don't... There are certain things we have to go through. There are certain things that will have to be formalized and such, but I think this would be a great initiative for our team members. I think that it also could incentivize, because based on the current entitlements that we have, everybody can have that access to that 401k. Everyone has access to Percy that wants it right now. But I believe that if we can be a little bit more bold and look, I think that'll be a great not only recruiting but retention tool, and at the same time providing a little additional amount of another benefit for the team members as they move forward. FTO, we have a tremendous FTO program. I mean, it's a flexible time off and such. But what I'm going to recommend to you, and it'll come to you again through the budget process, is Christine still alive back there? She's
sitting up straight.
She's going to love these next couple. But he's taking notes seriously. I'm going to recommend that ACHD allow any FTO bank hours over 120 to be annually to be contributed to the Percy 401k. Now, let's think about this, because if we have that, that's the ceiling. If you go over that, you lose it, and such. And so, if we provide our team members an opportunity to, quote, cash in, if that's the right term, and I'll probably get killed by the budget team on this one, but to me, that is another incentive when it comes down to, do you want to be a member of this team? Do you want to stay a member of this team? As we provide all these different options for them.
Bruce, understanding a lot about how this stuff could possibly work, because I used to be in that world.
Mm-hmm.
Are we going to have to hire a TPA to keep our books balanced?
No, that's what I got Sherwin for.
Okay. Well, it's a whole different world.
It is.
Because of the vesting aspects, and if someone leaves early, their unvested contributions have to come back into the pot and all that other stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
No, we already have some pretty good outside counsel on this, but at the same token, this is something that before we come to you formally, I want to make sure that we've, looked at this pile, looked at that pile, looked at this pile, make sure we're bringing you the right things. Another recommendation that will come in front of you, PTO. We do a great job on rewarding our team members at about the 9-year point, 5 to 9 year point forward. We're very competitive on all of the organizations with the number of hours per pay period that you can earn by being part of this great organization. What we don't do as great a job on is that initial 0 to 5 years. We're a little bit below. And that is a recruiting challenge that has been brought up to our HR team on a couple of occasions. So I'm going to recommend...
By candidates?
By candidates.
Okay.
You bet. I'm going to recommend that ACHD increase the PTO annual accumulation rate for team members under 5 years of service. So if the commission buys off on that, service levels from 0 to 9 years will accrue 168 hours annually, which is about 4 weeks. Today it's about 3. And so it's a small bump, but at the same token, it puts us right at the competitive edge when it comes down if it's a decision that's you got 2 folks and this is the issue, we now meet it, if not beat it. And then finally, within my authorities, for those of you that on our all staffs, I have a section in there where I recognize heroes with a director's coin and such. Well, I'm going to add a day off to those designated folks. And we generally do 1 or 2, an all staff and such. I think that's important as we continue to, again, focus on that number 1 priority when it comes down to the operation. So, commissioners, I'll close by saying we must continually address, we can't back off on the evolving and challenging landscape that the current market is thrown in front of all of us. And so those are the recommendations, those are the ideas that we've come up with. I've shared with you what was in my authority. I've shared with you what I will be bringing to you through the budget process and follow-on discussions for your determination as we go forward. But I truly believe that got to be bold, got to be flexible, got to be innovative, and got to be able to address the changing environment. So with that, that's my director's report for today, and I'll stand for any questions.
Mr. President, I have a question.
Yes.
Bruce, do we currently provide any moving reimbursement?
Yes, we do. And I'm glad you brought that up, Commissioner. I'm a Commissioner in Goldthorpe, Commissioner Pickering. It depends, but I'm going to give an average figure of $5,000. And what we do, and I'd like to, and I know the General Counsel and the head of HR are going to be working this, but when I talk about the annual incentive and or the hiring bonus, I'll call it, we have a criteria when we move people that say you must at least give us 3 years. If you give us only one and leave, you pay back 100%. If you give us 2 years, and it's an excellent, and if you give us 3 years, it's something else. That kind of criteria, because I don't believe in free money, that kind of criteria will be put on these different incentives if the commission wants to go down that path. But yes, we do that.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. President?
Yes.
Bruce, all these recommendations along with the actions that you're taking, do you have a memo on that? Because I've been taking notes here, but there's probably 25 bullet points here. Can you send us something that we could use to review it? And
Absolutely. As a matter of fact, I'll send you what I just read to you.
Okay, that'd be great.
And such, but I think it's important.
I'll just say one thing about this. It's not necessarily of support or anything else, but for 6 years now, I've been kind of harping on, and this with a very positive note, and warm feelings and everything else. This is a career a shop, not a career pit stop, and we have a great reputation for that. The pandemic situation has made it so that I don't have much of a feel for it. You obviously do, and many of our staff. But in a normal situation, going from 2 or 3 openings to 26 or 27 would have caused waves all over the place in this agency. So, whatever we can do to get that back down to where it's been historically on would be grateful.
I'm sure the head of HR would be incredibly appreciative because she deals with this as we all do.
Well, we have phenomenal people.
Yes, we do.
And that does not equate in anybody but with. I've been accused of calling people dumb before, but you have to be less than on top of your game to figure that not offering sufficient to get the best people is a good deal.
Mm-hmm.
Mr. President, thank you, Director Wong. I think we've got to hang on to the people that we've got because they are totally cream of the crop. Can't say enough about them all. And then we've got to be competitive out there in the job market, especially now as we're seeing it roll out from the pandemic. So great suggestions. Thank you.
I truly believe we're going to be seeing this for at least the next year and a half, at least. Now, at some point, there's going to be a leveling off, and as the commissioners that have been on the board for some time now know that we do take the appropriate actions when we don't have to have the certain people in certain areas. It's never fun, but at the same token, it's the right thing to do when it comes down to spending the taxpayer dollars. But we're going to be in this for a while, and so bold.
Mr. President,
yes.
Sorry, one last comment. Director Wong, I just really appreciate your perspective and leadership, especially when it comes towards the funding programs around paternity leave, parental leave, and child care, because we know that those truly impact not only the health and welfare of your employees, but the health and welfare and quality of life of those kiddos, and pays off in massive dividends. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
We really saw those issues with the daycare when the pandemic started to roll out.
They were already pretty strained, and now it's just even
and
worse.
that's just really accentuated, and and once again, ACHD stepped up for that too. So, but critical area.
Thank you, Commissioner. I know it's been a long day, and we'll do our best not to have it as long next week, but you are going to have an executive session, I'm telling you right now, next Wednesday.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you, sir.
We're adjourned.